Welcome back to Africa Roundtable. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you so much for coming out here to your view tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, wonderful. Let's kick off with the reflections on Sharpeville. Right? There are a lot of people who are saying, things haven't really changed much since Sharpeville, and a little earlier I was talking about another Sharpeville in the form of Marikana, and it continues in terms of how people are oppressed, etc., etc. That's number one. Number two, we've had a situation where during the Sharpeville times, if you like, the PAC was very strong, and it almost was in the forefront of leading those kind of struggles. We see a different kind of PAC now that seems to be emasculated, or at least not registering too much on the radar of national discourse and leadership and all of those things. Your reflections, just to kick us off.
Look, the issue of 21 March 1960, I think has had a great impact on the way we shape the nation that is called South Africa. We have chosen to canvass an opinion and said this is the Azanian nation. So in the Azanian school of thought, 21 March has been an event that was promoted largely by the PAC with the leadership of Mangaliso Sobu. He chose the date 21 March, and I'm trying to refer you to that date and link it up with Namibia, who celebrate their independence on that day.
Yes.
And also show that it encompasses others who are not necessarily within the PAC, but part of the mass movement to liberate the country. You remember I think it was in Newtonage or so, on the 21st of March in the 80s, 1983 exactly. There was confrontation with the authorities. Some people died there. So there's no way in which we can undermine the importance of 21 March, that the PAC has identified as the result of positive action campaign.
Yeah.
A campaign that was meant to bring transformation and change and radically remove reactionary forces who rule over people and bring in liberatory forces. So that agenda is still on an ongoing basis, because we cannot just move around without navigating with the landmark of where we're going. And where we're going is a liberated society, a society that people feel free to do things, and where people cannot be shot and killed as happened in Marikana. Asking for wages, I mean, to ask for a minimum wage that is accepted on an international level. And yet the authorities felt it was better to go and shoot innocent people. So the story continues, and we understand where all this is coming from. But the agenda of transformation and change will continue to be there.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the issue of the PAC.
Yes.
Look, like all liberation movement, you go through your peaks and your lows. We go through difficulties as we march towards freedom. Even if you look at it, we went into a phase of our own history as a people where human rights, the human rights culture is uppermost. Yeah. But there are difficulties with those human rights in a country like South Africa today, where the majority of the people are hit hard by poverty. They are hit hard by hunger, and the critical issue is really that we have not resolved the national question very well.
Yeah.
The national question means we should respect and honor the indigenous people of the country. In South Africa, it's the opposite. The indigenous people, all the people who were in South Africa, or in what is called South Africa, before colonial conquest, have been marginalized. And in the history of the world, it's only South Africans who have not been recognized as people with the right to self-determination.
Yeah.
They were confined to the Bantustan. You know, Sol Plaatje talked about this when less than 13% was given to black people, and this was taken to be an independent country. See, that's a fallacy.
Yeah.
And a fallacy never lasts. So the views of the PAC, despite the fact that we are talking about its lapses, its strengths, and so forth, the views and the vision of of the party are still relevant and will continue to be evergreen.
Yeah.
And that's what is most important.
Yeah. Does it worry you that it looks like your night is too long? You have a day and night, but yours seems to be going into day now. I mean, it's
no, our night
been ages since the PAC has made a significant impact in our body politic, especially after 94. If you look at 94 to 26 years, if somebody was born 26 years ago and exposed to a PAC, they weren't exposed to a thriving and vibrant PAC, not the one of Seroke, not the one, of Sharpeville. And so those are historical things are fine, but we have a country to build now, and it seems to me, and I will give you a chance to respond later after I hear what the others say, that it's no longer an instrument of change the way that it used to be. And I understand that there's a highs and lows, but yours is it's an extended leave, man.
It cannot be true. Look, there's a story behind the story.
Yeah.
But let me start with this. The CODESA process, and remember the PAC was participating in that process too. We had our one foot in it. But what happened is that prior to that, the conclusion of CODESA, I was a delegate there. I know this very well. The de Klerk regime made one fell swoop on PAC members, all its structures, from branch members to National Executive Committee members, and put them in prison. This was in a police-generated project called Operation Standstill. It was set in Afrikaans, Stilstand.
Yeah.
Now, that operation is not being talked about in the media, and the PAC somehow also refuses to talk about it because you always accuse us of being victims or having a victim image. Yeah. But it's true that the Western powers, including the de Klerk regime, all work to penetrate us and destroy us by infiltrating people inside the PAC and collapsing those structures. What is good is that the PAC has not died, despite all of that. We've tried almost all angles to bring the PAC together, and we're still here. We're still here to take the PAC forward. Our members, and here's what we've contributed. We've contributed our trained cadres into the system. They've gone into the army, the security agencies. We've contributed our skilled personnel in the public service. And most of our members are there actually taking leading positions in those institutions.
Okay.
We've contributed largely at local government level, where our members operate, and we can identify them. Some of them are working in cities that are working very well as city managers. So we do not see what people say are low peaks or that the PAC is not contributing. We've contributed to the democracy in different ways. And those contributions are positive. They've helped. More than that, despite the fact that we've been victimized with most of our members in prison, we've maintained the peace. We've maintained the discipline. We've maintained approaching the things lawfully. And that's a contribution to a stable democracy.
Right.
And you must give it to us.
I hear you, my brother. I hear you. You've made me see it in a different way. I'll come back to that. What your comment?
I mean, Sharpeville, for me, I was not even born at the time. But, one gets to read and understand what happened at Sharpeville.
Yeah.
What is, I think, not fortunate in this current era is that not much, even from a government side, that the role that the PAC played, it's like everything's about the ANC, and not wanting to give also shine what is due to the role that the PAC played in terms of the Sharpeville massacre. And I mean, those were people fighting, for human rights issues and so on. And 26 years down, we still have people without clean water, which is very painful. That those are basic, rights that are taken away from people, needs that the government had promised, the ANC government in 1994. So people's rights are violated through people not having access to clean water. We've got challenges of electricity, not due to the ESCOM issue, but there are communities like in the rural areas where they still some face crisis, around issues of electricity. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you think that the issue of political activism and so on, if you compare it with the days of Sharpeville, etc., has died somehow, or it has had a stroke at least, if we are to be frank?
If we're to be honest, post-1994, because activism was not also about political parties, but even community activism.
Yeah.
And that's why in the past 10 years, things happened, you know, and because of there was not community activism that was there. And there's a need, you know, for South Africans to be active again so that we avoid things that happened in the past 10 years. You know? And I think it was maybe deliberate effort, as Baba says, that to penetrate, you know, and to kill that activism within the communities, because communities were able to organize themselves, you know, in spite of the political parties being there.
All right. Yeah. Your reflections, particularly on the PAC as an instrument of change, right? Because the Sharpeville massacre and the leadership that was around that time was clearly at the height, obviously, of struggle and so on. And it looks like it has diminished over time, right?
Good evening, even Jumbo Africa. I will say to you, 60 years of Sharpeville massacre, to the young person who's watching JJ this evening, is to look back at that. PAC was formed only 1 year ago, JJ. It was in 1959. And within a year, it was able to mobilize a campaign against human dignity, against movement of Africans wherever they were. And when you look, I look at the young leadership of Ntate Khosana in Langa. We'll always talk about Sharpeville and we leave Langa. We'll always leave Soweto, Mofolo, where Ntate Sobukwe led that march. So I will always say to you that the PAC of that time was the PAC of the continent. It was looking at the broader struggles of the continent. They looked at Nkrumah's philosophy. They looked at Marcus Garvey, diaspora. So there was a broader PAC vision of that time, of the 60s, that grew even into the African National Congress Youth League by then. When you think of Mda Limbede, there was that yearning, you know, JJ. But for the young people of today in the 21st century, we saw Sobukwe's image rising in 2015 during the Fees Must Fall. So that shows you that the image of Sobukwe was there, but it was erased, deleted at some point. But not only Sobukwe, you know, JJ. So I think the factionalism that was in the PAC post-94 as well affected it, you know, Brajeki, with the breakaway of Clarence Makwetu and Tami, forming PAM. You know, there were many divisions within PAC post-94 that, like you've said, the infiltration was there, JJ.
Yeah.
Within the ANC as well, post-Polokwane, there was infiltration within the ANC. Azapo as well, there was the same infiltration. So for me, JJ, is the project of the liberation movement now in the 21st century. Wow. What is it that will forget Sharpeville 21st, that President Sunday, when he made the national disaster management process, he even forget Sharpeville to say, but in remembrance of Sharpeville and human rights violations, coronavirus, it is another disease that humiliates and dehumanizes a black soul.
Yeah.
So I think that, JJ, going to the leadership, I will assume that the PAC leadership should look back into the teachings of Sobukwe and pick up what are the current issues that are facing Africa and what are the issues that are facing South Africa.
Absolutely. After the break, I want to zone into that to say, all right, even if you had to just pack the issues of the liberation movement and so, right, is there a need for a new and a revived kind of activism across all of us, right, in order for us to almost pay tribute to people who died in Sharpeville? Right? Because there seems to be a lot of hopelessness. I mean, I heard Musibidi Mangena, he corrected me yesterday, you know, who just basically says, we started well, but everything now is almost sort of come to a standstill. If you look at education, health, all the key things that should make our people have a better life. And I want to hear what you guys believe should be done. What is the kind of intervention that is necessary now to be able to almost go back to Sharpeville days and pick up that spear there for the sake of what should happen today? Let's take a break, and after the break we carry on with the Africa Roundtable. All right, welcome back to Africa Roundtable as we round it off tonight. We don't have much time tonight. I want you to just kick us off on this thing. These commemorations for me are frustrating. Okay, I don't know how many commemorations we have had of Sharpeville, etc. You know, and it looks like the consciousness sort of is pricked around those times, and then we go back to our ways. If you look at all of the indicators, all key indicators are saying that we are going south, right? Half the people are living in poverty. 14 million people going to bed hungry. Half of the young people out of jobs. You know, I can go on. 0.3 economic growth. What needs to be done? What's the new activism we need, and what shape should it take? Let's start with that.
JJ, I think what is very important, we should never forget our history and our memory. It is important to remember that, JJ, if you go there, Sharpeville, the families of the victims and survivors connect with that day, first of all. Respect of those families is key. You have spoken about surrounding areas in that area. There is no water, electricity, sanitation. Every year, JJ, Sharpeville, there is protest, actually. And not just to fight against government, but to show the challenges that the people of Sharpeville have gone through. The new activism, JJ, is to fix the local governance, JJ. The local municipalities have to be fixed in those areas. Mfuleni has been in a crisis now. Sidibeng has been in a crisis as well. Ekurhuleni is facing challenges as well. So it is very broad, JJ, when we look at these townships of the sites of struggle. You look at the Bob struggle of 1994, Sakuma Mafikeng. It happened during this month, the 10th and 11th of March. The Mafikeng struggle as well, the new activism is that you leave Bantustan thinking and you bring the Pan-African thinking, the black consciousness thinking. For me, JJ, is to bring both to happen. The new activism is to say environmental consciousness, JJ, where is it? You know, cleanness in our areas, where is it? The curriculum in the schools, JJ, the new activism is to have teachers who understand the Pan-African struggles of the continent, of the region, of their own challenges. But the issue again, JJ, the new activism again is to fight corruption in the local municipalities. Because I think if we don't fight corruption there, we are going to be struggling, JJ, with service delivery, by giving people basic things. So for me, the new activism is to have vocal community leaders, community members, and not only being on Twitterati and on the social media only, but come on the community meetings, JJ. We look at the ward committees. The ward committees don't function, Barajeki. When we look at local municipalities, when we have this crisis of maybe corona, JJ, municipalities don't have a risk management centers. Disaster management centers are not in local municipalities. Clinics are closed. We don't have health new conscious members, people who can fight health issues. So for me, those are the issues, briefly.
I think I would like to agree, especially on the issue of education, because it's like a mindset. When you're at school, you know, when you are conscious, you know, in terms of what the surroundings around you. Because if I'll be political conscious, then there's no activism, because it starts with that. Outside, I always say, before you are even a member of any political party, you are first a member of society. And if you understand that you come from a particular society and these are the challenges, because the reality of today is that the youth of, let's say, in the 60s, 70s, and the youth of today, like, they're far apart from each other. Today is more about parties, drinking. Yes, we agree that there's unemployment, you know, and so forth. But how does the youth organize themselves? Because it is not only government's responsibility to create jobs. Captains of the industry, they've got a responsibility to create jobs in this country, you know. So it also starts there in terms of the curriculum, because I think the South African government, the ANC government, has tried so many curriculums in terms of education. Changing. But in terms of ideology, one doesn't get a sense. I mean, if you look at the Cubans, how patriotic they are, because also it's also about patriotism, loving your country, you know. And when you love your country, you make sure that you protect your country, but you fight all the wrong things that are happening within the communities. And Tubona is very important, because in the past, your neighbor's child would not go to bed without food. But today, we don't care. Everyone just looks at their resources, and they don't care about the surroundings in their areas.
Absolutely.
Look, there has been
needs to be done.
There's been a lot of mistakes and problems that came as a result of poor leadership. And I think we should shoot straight at this issue. The problems are reflected with poor leadership at local level, in the municipalities and so on. I think you'll understand this. Let me just make an example. You can't have almost 80% of local councillors who can't even read the balance sheet, who cannot understand that the vote they're making will impact on the delivery of services that implied money. And it's a variety of things that leads to this, but it's also a clear reflection of poor leadership of the government and the ruling party when it comes to those issues. And I think that blind spot should be pointed out to the government. You know, there's a term, kakistocracy. It's a Greek term, but it's really lowering standards and so on in order to accommodate other people around you. And it has resulted in a state where, also going to local government, people kill each other because they think if you're a councillor, you're on the gravy train. Yeah. Now, there are other good examples in the world. I mean, if you look at Singapore, they developed the country, but they emphasized a lot on education so that everybody was moved from one level to the next. And they became part of the modern world. They made our state modern. We have actually done the opposite. And it is not only because we defend against because we are living in a community of several other communities who don't see things the same way. You see, white people as a structure and a social force look at this and say, we were better than them. Yeah. Now, that's a divided country because they have this wishful thinking to see the state collapse. And I think they, to a large extent, should take the blame for it because what you think is what you want to see happening, and they push wrong characters. Now, from the liberation movement point of view, we must raise the bar. We must bring in people who are capable, who are able to serve the people, and who have a love for their own people, because it starts there. And if we don't do that, we'll have a problem. But how do we resolve these issues? We must hold a national dialogue on a continuous basis. We should be able to talk to each other. It doesn't really matter from which angle or persuasion you come from. We should be able to identify these issues spot on and provide good leadership, because leadership comes from
that leadership. Do you think that there's an issue about African leadership or black leadership, in particular black parties and so on, uniting? Because they seem to all be fractured, man. You know, I mean, not only about the PAC, I mean, you can say what you like, but the reality is we've had to be faced with the spectacle of a PAC. You know, one day you've got two presidents, and what? Same with Azapo, same with NAFCOC, which is supposed to be a black business thing. Each time they are in the news, they are fighting over money, they are divided. You know, black business unity is at its lowest. We just had another splinter, I don't know how to call it a splinter, they don't like it. But they formed another organization instead of strengthening the ones that are there. Do you think that there is something to be said there about black unity to be able to conquer what's happening to ourselves?
I think our nation, or us as a people, we have very serious problems that we are not confronting. And it starts in families, in communities where we live, because the moral high ground of the liberation movement seem to have declined. I mean, we at one stage were having high expectations from the changes that happened in the country. And those expectations were made because we had credible leadership. But the second layer of leadership that came after that seemed to have got it all wrong, and things went horribly wrong in such a way that the results are these difficulties that we're talking about now. But in the PAC, we see it differently. I mean, and the problems that we have, I'm not playing it down, but the PAC is a reflection of our own communities as well. I mean, we have good guys in the PAC, very good cadres and comrades, but who don't want to be involved in the negativities that have come up to them. We have spoilers, and we have all this, and all these are people we see in our community. Even the ANC has these problems right now because it's a reflection of what we have in our society. So we must, I think, deal with these issues and be able to unite on the basis of our patriotism.
Yeah.
Because the whole world is looking at us and saying they can't do anything for themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas we had such great promise.
Absolutely.
So we have to take greater steps to correct the wrongs.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time to. Your last word, we won't be able to go into Corona, into Africa.
Oh.
Just give me your last word on the current subject matter on the table.
I would have want to go on Namibia, JJ, quickly. It's 30 years of Namibia. They've cancelled their Independence Day because of Corona.
Yeah.
We have cancelled Sharpeville Day as well. Munangagwa has cancelled 18 April next month for the Independence Day.
Okay.
So I think when you look at commemorative events and the history, JJ, what is critical is the memory, is the education component, JJ.
Yeah.
And again, is the issue that we have raised, leadership. How do we groom and build leadership in Africa? And how do we not lament on the history only, JJ? But we look at the current challenges that is facing South Africa, is facing Africa. But Corona, JJ, it is the news in Africa. We have 33 countries now. Not people who have died, like people are making mistakes, infected. And then we have 33 countries. We have 21 who are free from the virus. And interestingly, Egypt is leading. We are not leading. Egypt is 126. We are 116 so far, infected again. And affected. We have not come to that.
I have to take a break, and I want to talk about, if you like, the continental response. Do you think it's adequate?
Yeah.
Do you think that, because I couldn't get a clear answer from that on, for example, the Pan-Africanist, what is it, Pan-African
Parliament,
Pan-African Parliament, and AU and executive, whether or not there's a proper continental coordination of the response. But also I want to hear your views about whether we are sitting on a potential bigger crisis once these things spread to communities where the basics are not in place. You know, it's nice to say, oh, wash your hands and what. When you don't even have water to drink, are you going to use it to wash your hands? Let's take a break. And after the break, we round off the Africa Roundtable. All right. Welcome back to your view roundtable tonight as we look at Corona in Africa now in the remaining time. Just pick it up there, Advocate.
JJ, I was saying that this coronavirus, the challenge that we are having is even what President said. Most of us have not gone into what is National Act, Disaster Act. What does that Act of 2002 says? In other aspects, like you are saying, responses. What will the local municipality do? What will the province do, JJ? There were 3 provinces that were key: Gauteng, Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal. So if you look at these areas, these are the places that JJ provincial management, teams must be there. Responses must be there. But I think the parliament is losing that act, because that act, JJ, came into force actually twice only. This is for the 3rd time. The first time it was in Alexandra in 2008 during Afrophobia violence. The second one came during the floods that we had in 2010. But the 3rd time is on on a disease level now, disaster. The funding question, JJ, on fighting Corona. I think that's the issue that we have to be focusing on, that we put resources. But my fear is the IKS, JJ, the traditional healing. We're all rushing to the sanitizers, to the clinics, but we don't talk about our indigenous knowledge system. If there is a flu virus, JJ, we have to look at our indigenous knowledge systems, because that act says about it. It says put IKS in integrating disaster risk management. You know, it says again, involve universities. Now we are shutting them down. Involve universities to do further research and to be the centers of coronavirus.
They're just stopping contact.
Contact, JJ, but I mean that you still have to
research. Research is not stopped.
You cannot, JJ, stop research. Even media cannot. Hence we say we are being coronavirused. You know, every day there is corona story on a headline, but we have not got into the data of it and the law. What does the law say? And it is for 90 days, by the way, JJ. President has given...
For 90 days.
15 March to 15 June, but they can assess it...
State of disaster.
Yes, JJ, but they can assess it in 2 weeks, in a month. Zimbabwe is giving 60 days. Namibia is giving 60 days. Ghana is giving 60 days. We have given 90 days according to their law.
All right. What's your feeling, though, about the continental coordination, in your view? Is it been adequate, or everybody's just sort of running helter-skelter, doing their own thing?
I've not had a sense, of that coordinated process, in terms of the continental. And interesting enough, what the president or the chairman of the AU, we also expect us to lead in that regard as South Africa, in making sure that we coordinate this process properly, because now different countries for themselves, and we know that the challenges that even the continent, some countries in the continent are facing in terms of their health institutions, they're not that strong compared to us in South Africa, even if we have challenges, but we are better advanced than other African countries in the continent,
Yes, I think South Africa's vulnerability is largely because we're a multicultural society, and people traveling to South Africa from the epicenters. And I think curbing it from there and trying to limit travel has been the right steps that government has taken. And we have to look at the Disaster Act and see if all of us, because this is an emergency, there must be volunteers, there must be many other people who make their own contributions to curb the possibility of coronavirus spreading inside the country. And also, I think because we like magic, in South Africa there has been and I'm saying this because that's what we are. We have a tendency to exaggerate. So there's been a lot of fake news and people taking this as something that's not very serious in some instances. So we have to do a lot of education on an ongoing basis, because the matter is fluid. It moves from time to time, so that we can be able to battle and win.
For me, I think, JJ, on the education aspect, messaging should be in all indigenous languages.
That's not happening now.
I think it is happening partly, and then communicators of the government, JJ, they need crash 101, basic 101 on a crisis communication. How do we communicate? Our health ministry, JJ, for me, what was happy for me when the ministers met, it was chapter 2 of the Act, where you talk about intergovernmental. What Brajeki raised, volunteers are in chapter 7, the last chapter, where you go for the experts. But chapter 2, military hospitals, JJ, to be open to the patients, not to the exiles or to the soldiers only. It means even patients who are going to be having challenges, the military hospitals will come handy. I think that is a great move, JJ. But what we are raising at the AU level, as we are sharing the AU, this is threatening us, JJ.
Don't you think there should have been a summit, an urgent summit on corona by now, or did the AU summit in January deal with corona?
No, JJ.
No, maybe it did, because remember there are closed sessions, so-called closed sessions. Even though who were attending there, we didn't know half the things they were talking about.
But you expect to have it in the communique.
There was a communique, JJ. I will say to you, JJ, humanitarian disasters in Africa, it was Cyclone Idai 1 year later that we have slept on it. I think this even current pandemic is part of what the AU should have engaged. But now this number of 100, I don't know who have come up with the number of 100, that you cannot have more than 100 people.
Apparently this World Health Organization framework.
It is that framework. So when you say extraordinary summit or a summit, JJ, quickly, you have to count the countries, then you have to have 54 only. That can come, one per country maybe. But I'm now saying, JJ.
But there must be a high-level committee of some sort that can deal with this. Without bringing the entire heads of states together.
Definitely, JJ. But I think the challenge is that the AU has been caught up. The regional bodies, the SADC, we don't hear the SADC raising the issue around what is the humanitarian intervention. We see only the closure of borders. We see regulation of weddings and funerals in many African countries, JJ, which is alien to the continent, because our people
What's happening there? What
the numbers as well.
The funeral, you can only family.
And you know, funerals in Africa, we don't invite people. Funerals are something that people pledge solidarity.
Now it's 100 people.
You know, and then weddings, you can cap on them. You know, parties, you can cap on them. But the issue again, JJ, for me, it is that continental response, as you were saying, it's a continental security threat, this issue, JJ. The issue of when I raise universities, it is because Wahun University and Harvard, there's an allegation and a conspiracy going on that the universities might have colluded to create this chemical warfare.
That's a conspiracy theory now, man.
It is there. You must just check it that Harvard University and Wahoo universities, there are issues around a biomedical or a biochemical warfare, JJ. That is one aspect that universities have to look into. The third aspect is that African leaders, JJ, like you were saying, their health system, their health infrastructure, it is ailing, it is a challenge. But it is said that when you see Southern Africa, North Africa, JJ, are the worst hit, actually. Central Africa, DRC, where there was Ebola, it is low.
Yeah.
Uganda is low. You know, one can say you find places like the islands.
But how do you explain that? How are you going to explain that in the maybe the fact that it has not yet spread there, but once it spread there, well, we'll be
it will be a disaster. It will be a serious disaster. And South Africa, JJ, finally, I will say, we were leading with this act to be drafting the Disaster Management Act in 2000, early those years. So we were quick to give a model to other African countries. Hence, even the keeping of the number is being used by many African countries, the closing of borders. But I think, JJ, it still goes back to how are we going to recover out of this coronavirus? Because for me, it's that on your show, JJ, since January, we've been raising this corona. I don't know whether viewers can track how we have been talking about coronavirus, JJ, since January on this show.
Yeah.
And I think it's a matter again of following how are we going to recover in terms of national rehabilitation, national developmental challenges.
With the kind of economic growth that we have, right, we seem to, we're already facing a disaster. We were already in a recession before the corona thing hit hard. You know, the economic growth targets were revised down by global bodies, by IMF, by World Bank, by, you know, what is this, rating agencies, etc., and by Treasury itself, you know, given this. So, do you think that suggestions by business that we need to immediately look at the tax regime and so on sounded like the Deputy Speaker of Parliament was dismissive of that, to say, no, they can't just start by saying cut the tax. They must start by telling us what are they going to do themselves as business. Sure. But if you look at the country, I think it's in Italy where they've already dealt with that issue, to say, we're shutting down businesses, we need to look at how are we going to mitigate that. What's your view of that recovery on economy?
I think first and foremost, we need different school of thoughts. Because also it's an issue of capitalism, you know, and socialism, you know, and as correctly as you are saying, I mean, President Ramaphosa, I mean, has been going out there in terms of investors. There's going to be huge implications because some of these companies will have to draw back because of the challenges that they are facing currently, the monies that most companies have lost in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know. So the South African government and also, and I think the different school of thoughts in terms of think tanks, those from the left, you know, in terms of the thinking, need to come up with a position, you know, a paper to say this is the alternative based on where we are, because the reality of the matter, this is going to be like, for the next 10 years, we're going to feel it. It's going to be worse than 2008 recession.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the last word.
Yes, the coronavirus is a global phenomenon, and it has affected the markets. It's all over the world. Africa will have serious difficulties because we have many problems. Displaced people moving without control, who have no countries and where they live. So the economy will be the most hard hit, even if we manage to cap and control it after a year or so. Because if you go through 90 days with an economic shutdown, I mean, you're in a serious crisis. And all the resources, as government has already said, will have to be put into this, into fighting this problem. And we start from degree zero. From the way I see it. So there must be new measures and new plans taken to see how we will recover and from this disaster.
Absolutely. Can I just say something on the issue of water? Yeah. You know, it was very sad to read, I think it's an article on one of the newspapers, you know, that the Minister of Water, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, said now they will be taking out JoJo's. That it had to take Corona for people to have access to water. It's bad. I mean, I'll give an example. You have got the Guyane water project, which is a crisis. We can go to Makana municipality, which we know that the court has dissolved. And one of the problems was that the issue of people not having access to clean water. As we speak right now, some of the townships in Makana only get water twice a day. And how do you expect people to wash their hands, be health conscious in terms of hygiene?
It's a big issue.